I was lying on the floor of the storage room again, but this time I wasn't alone. Something was pressed against the ceiling above me, breathing in rhythm with my heartbeat, and I could feel its weight bearing down through the darkness like gravity had reversed. My phone showed 3:17 a.m., the same cursed time it always happened, and I knew with absolute certainty that if I closed my eyes even for a second, I would never open them again. The air was so cold I could see my breath, and in that fog I saw the outline of fingers, long and wrong, reaching down toward my face. You're about to hear how I survived something that wasn't supposed to let me go, how I discovered the one truth that stands between the seen and unseen world, and why being awake is not the same as being aware. This is the story of how God gave me eyes to see what was hunting me. My name is Luvis, and 6 months ago I was a different man. Not better, not worse, just different in the way that people who haven't touched the edge of the supernatural are different. I worked at a packaging warehouse, lived in a one-bedroom apartment with walls so thin I could hear my neighbor's television through the drywall, and I was drowning in debt that accumulated like interest on a loan I never remembered taking out. Medical bills from my mother's final year, credit cards I'd maxed out just to keep the lights on, student loans from a degree I never finished because I had to work instead. The numbers didn't just haunt me, they defined the borders of my entire existence. Every month was a calculation, a desperate mathematics of which bill could wait and which collector could be avoided. I stopped answering my phone unless I recognized the number. I stopped checking my mail because the envelopes were always red, always urgent, always demanding money I didn't have. My credit score had dropped so low that I couldn't even rent a better apartment, couldn't finance a reliable car, couldn't see any way forward that didn't involve working until I died in a warehouse somewhere, unmissed and unremarkable. That's the version of desperate I was when I met the seller. His name was Marcus Webb, and he found me, not the other way around. I was eating lunch in my car, parked behind the warehouse where nobody could see me crying over my bank statement when he knocked on my window. He was thin, pale, with eyes that didn't quite meet mine when he spoke. He said he'd seen me around, heard I was looking for a change, and he had a property he needed to sell quickly. The price he quoted was so low I actually laughed, a bitter sound that surprised both of us. "That's not possible," I told him, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand, embarrassed he'd caught me like this. "Houses don't sell for that price, not in this market, not anywhere." But Marcus insisted. He said he'd inherited the property and needed it gone, that he was moving out of state and couldn't manage it from a distance, that he just wanted someone to take it off his hands. He showed me pictures on his phone, a small 2-bedroom house with vinyl siding, a chain-link fence around a modest yard, an attached garage, and what he called a storage room addition that had been built by the previous owner. It looked normal, ordinary, the kind of place that wouldn't stand out in any neighborhood. "Why so cheap?" I asked, because even desperate people have some survival instinct left. Marcus looked away then, staring at something beyond my car window. "It just needs to be lived in," he said quietly. "It's been empty too long, makes the insurance complicated. I just need someone there, someone who will actually use it." I should have heard the warning in those words. I should have questioned why a man would sell a house for half its value just to have someone living in it. But when you've been drowning as long as I had, you don't question the life raft. You just grab it and hope it holds. We met 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. Marcus showed me the property in person, walked me through rooms that smelled faintly of cleaning products and something else, something organic I couldn't quite identify. The house was exactly as the pictures showed, plain, functional, a little outdated but structurally sound. The storage room was attached to the back, accessible through the kitchen, and it was notably colder than the rest of the house, which Marcus explained away as poor insulation in the addition. "Previous owner used it for cold storage," he said, not quite looking at the room as we stood in its doorway. "Kept the temperature down for preserving things." The room was empty except for some metal shelving units along one wall. It had no windows, just overhead fluorescent lights that buzzed when switched on. The walls were painted an industrial gray, and the concrete floor had a drain in its center, the kind you'd see in a garage or basement, Something about it made my skin prickle, but I attributed that to the cold. Marcus only had one condition, and he stated it firmly on my final visit before signing. Don't use the storage room. Just leave it locked. Use it for nothing. The rest of the house is yours, but that room stays sealed. I laughed nervously. Why put it in the sale if I can't use it? It's part of the structure, he said. Can't legally separate it, but trust me, you don't need it. 2 bedrooms, a garage, that's plenty of space, right? It was more space than I'd had in 5 years. I agreed to his terms because what did I care about one locked room when I was getting a whole house for the price of 2 years' rent on my awful apartment? Poor people don't ask questions when they're handed miracles. They just sign the papers and hope the miracle doesn't evaporate. The closing happened fast, faster than should have been possible. Marcus paid for expedited processing, handled all the paperwork himself, barely let me read through the documents before sliding them in front of me for signatures. I should have been suspicious, should have hired a lawyer, should have done 100 things differently. But I was so tired of being crushed, so desperate for something to go right, that I just signed my name over and over until Marcus handed me the keys with shaking hands. Good luck, he said, and the way he said it made it sound less like a pleasantry and more like a prayer. I moved in on a Saturday in late September. The weather was turning cold, that early autumn chill that promises harder winter ahead. I didn't have much to move. My entire life fit into my car and 3 trips from the apartment. The house felt enormous compared to what I was used to, all that space echoing with my footsteps as I carried boxes through rooms that were mine, actually mine. The first night I felt something like hope. I ordered pizza, sat on my old couch in my new living room, and watched television without hearing my neighbors' competing noise. The house settled around me with the normal creaks and groans of any structure. Nothing unusual, nothing concerning. I went to bed in the larger bedroom, spread out in the space, and fell asleep feeling like maybe my luck had finally changed. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of my phone ringing. Half asleep, I grabbed it and saw my own number on the caller ID. That jolted me awake fully, my heart suddenly pounding. I stared at the screen as it rang, my own contact information glowing in the darkness, which was impossible because my phone was in my hand, so what was calling me? The ringing stopped. The room fell silent except for my breathing, which sounded too loud in the darkness. I turned on my bedside lamp and the normal yellow light made me feel foolish. Probably just a glitch, a spoofed number, one of those spam calls that fake local numbers to trick you into answering. I was being paranoid, but I didn't sleep well the rest of that night. I kept feeling like someone was watching me from above, a weight of attention pressing down from the ceiling. Every time I started to drift off, I'd snap awake with my heart racing, certain I'd heard breathing that wasn't my own. When morning finally came, I was exhausted, irritable, and I attributed it to the stress of moving, the unfamiliarity of a new place. The second night was worse. I dreamed I was walking through my house, but it was wrong, stretched out, the hallway between the bedrooms extending impossibly long. At the end of it was a door I didn't recognize, and from behind it I heard my name whispered in a voice that sounded like my own but flattened, emptied of anything human. I walked toward it even though I didn't want to, my feet moving without my permission, and when I reached for the doorknob I saw that my hand was covered in bruises, dark purple marks like fingerprints pressed into my skin. I woke up gasping, tangled in my sheets, my phone ringing again with my own number. It was 3:17 a.m. exactly. I didn't answer. I turned off my phone completely, pulled the blanket over my head like a child hiding from monsters, and told myself I was just stressed, just adjusting, just tired. But when I went to the bathroom to splash water on my face, I saw the bruises. They were real, circling my left wrist in distinct finger-shaped marks, dark and tender to the touch. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my own reflection, trying to remember if I'd bumped into something, grabbed myself somehow, but I had no memory of any impact that would leave marks like this. Work became difficult. I was exhausted all the time, running on maybe 3 hours of sleep a night, and the fatigue made me angry in a way I'd never been before. Small inconveniences enraged me. A coworker asking a simple question made me want to scream. My supervisor commenting on my pace sent me into an internal fury, so intense I had to lock myself in the bathroom to keep from exploding. I didn't recognize this version of myself, this raw nerve of a person who couldn't handle normal human interaction, without violence simmering just beneath my skin. The nightmares intensified. Every night I walked that impossible hallway, got closer to that whispering door, and every morning I woke up with new marks on my body. Bruises on my arms, scratches across my shoulders, and once, a split lip that bled onto my pillow, though I had no memory of injury. I started taking pictures of myself before bed, documenting my unmarked skin, then comparing it to the damage I'd find in the morning. The evidence was undeniable. Something was happening to me while I slept. I tried everything I could afford, which wasn't much. I bought melatonin, took hot showers before bed, avoided screens, drank chamomile tea, but nothing helped. The moment I fell asleep, the nightmare would start, and I'd wake at 3:17 a.m. to my phone ringing with my own number, displaying increasingly impossible call durations. Once it showed a call lasting 3 hours, even though I'd heard it ring for maybe 30 seconds. Another time the caller ID showed my name, but the number was all zeros. 3 weeks after moving in, I woke up and I wasn't in my bed. I was lying on the cold concrete floor of the storage room, still in my pajamas, the overhead fluorescent lights buzzing above me. The door was locked from the outside. I could see the deadbolt turn through the small gap between door and frame. Panic hit me like ice water. I pounded on the door, shouting, but I lived alone and the house was set back from the street, no close neighbors to hear. I searched for my phone and found it on the metal shelving, placed carefully, intentionally. When I grabbed it, I saw I'd missed 17 calls from my own number, all timestamped throughout the night. The battery was at 3%. I used what little charge remained to call 911, but when the dispatcher answered, all she could hear was static and what she later described as someone whispering underneath the noise. The call died. My phone died. I sat in that cold room for 3 hours until sunrise, and only then did I hear the deadbolt slide open on its own, the door swinging inward to reveal my empty kitchen beyond. I ran out, grabbed my car keys, and drove to a 24-hour diner where I sat in a bright booth surrounded by normal people eating normal food, trying to convince myself I was still sane. I researched sleepwalking, read medical articles, considered carbon monoxide poisoning or a gas leak causing hallucinations. I bought a carbon monoxide detector and installed it in every room. They all showed safe levels. I bought a cheap security camera and set it up in my bedroom, angling it to capture both my bed and the bedroom door, then forced myself to go to sleep that night despite the terror sitting heavy in my chest. The next morning I reviewed the footage with shaking hands. It showed me lying in bed, restless, tossing and turning. At 3:17 a.m. the camera glitched, the image fragmenting into digital noise. When it cleared a second later, the angle had shifted slightly, now pointing more at the ceiling than before. I watched myself continue to sleep, but something felt wrong about the image, something I couldn't quite identify. I went through the footage frame by frame, advancing slowly through the glitched section. Most of it was corrupted data, unreadable pixels, but in one single frame, crystal clear for just that instant, I saw it. A figure standing on my ceiling, defying gravity, looking straight down at my sleeping body. It was humanoid but wrong, too thin, with limbs that bent at too many angles, and it was reaching down toward me. I threw the laptop across the room. I actually screamed, a sound I didn't know I could make, raw and terrified. Then I grabbed my keys and went to my car, intending to drive anywhere else, sleep in a parking lot, get a motel room, anything to not be in that house. But my car wouldn't start. The battery was completely dead, even though it had been fine the day before. I tried to jump it using cables and my neighbor's car, but nothing worked. The engine wouldn't even turn over. I called a mechanic who said he couldn't come out for 3 days and quoted me a diagnostic fee I couldn't afford. I checked my bank account and saw I had $43 until my next paycheck in 5 days. The mathematics of poverty trapped me again. I couldn't afford a motel, couldn't afford to fix my car, couldn't afford to break my lease and go somewhere else, couldn't afford anything except to go back into that house and hope I survived another night. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom. I tried the couch. the floor of the living room, even the bathtub, but it didn't matter. Every night I'd fall asleep wherever I was, and every morning I'd wake up on the cold concrete floor of the storage room, locked in, marked with new bruises and scratches that bloomed across my skin like horrible flowers. I lost weight because I was too afraid to eat much, my stomach constantly churning with anxiety. I lost time because the exhaustion made me drift through days in a fog. I almost lost my job when I fell asleep during a shift and was written up for negligence. My supervisor asked if I was using drugs, and I almost wished I was because that would be an explanation, a problem with a solution. I tried to research the house, but the property records were oddly sparse. Marcus had owned it for less than a year, inheriting it from someone named David Torrens, who'd owned it for 11 months before dying of what was listed as a heart attack. Before that, the ownership trail got murky, passing through a series of LLCs and trust funds that seemed designed to obscure the actual owners. I found an old neighbor through a local forum and called her, an elderly woman named Mrs. Pacheco who'd lived on the street for 40 years. "Oh, that house," she said when I gave her the address, and her voice dropped to something like pity. "Nobody stays there long, honey. Someone moves in, seems fine for a bit, then either they're gone or they're gone, if you understand me." "What does that mean?" I asked, gripping my phone so tight my knuckles went white. 3 owners back, man named Chen, they found him in that back room, she said quietly. "Died in his sleep, they said, but my husband saw when they brought him out. Said he looked terrified, eyes still open. And before him, a couple, only the wife made it out. She was in some institution last I heard, still talking about the thing on the ceiling." I felt cold all over. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why is this not disclosed? "Different LLCs own it each time, different sellers," Mrs. Pacheco said. "And who's going to believe it anyway? Sounds crazy, doesn't it? A haunted house in the suburbs. People don't believe until they're living it, and by then it's too late." I hung up and immediately called Marcus, but his number was disconnected. I looked him up on social media and found his profiles all deleted. I drove to the address he'd listed on the closing documents and found an empty lot. Marcus Webb had been a ghost himself, just solid enough to pass me the curse. That night I decided I wouldn't sleep. I drank coffee, took caffeine pills, blasted music, anything to stay awake. If I couldn't sleep, I couldn't end up in that room. But human bodies aren't designed to fight themselves forever. Around 2:00 a.m., sitting at my kitchen table with my eyes burning, I felt the irresistible weight of exhaustion pulling me down. I tried to stand, to walk, to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. My head lowered to the table, and consciousness left me like water draining from a sink. I dreamed the hallway again, but this time I reached the door. This time I opened it. Inside was not a room but an absence, a space where reality felt thin, and hanging in that space was the thing from the ceiling. Up close I could see it had been human once, or wore the shape of human like an uncomfortable suit. Its eyes were where eyes should be, but filmed over with white, unseeing but aware. Its mouth moved, and I heard my own voice come out. "You were never the buyer," it said. "You were the replacement." I tried to run, but the hallway behind me was gone. There was only the room, and the thing was reaching for me with fingers that had too many joints, and I could feel its intention like a physical force. It wanted me to stay, to sleep forever, to become like it, another layer of whatever this place was building toward. I woke up screaming on the floor of the storage room, but this time was different. This time I wasn't alone. The thing from my dreams was there, pressed against the ceiling like it had been in the camera footage, and it was lowering itself toward me slowly, inexorably, its horrible fingers reaching down. I scrambled backward until I hit the wall, trapped in the corner, watching it descend. The air was so cold my breath came out in huge clouds, and in those clouds I could see shapes, faces, the people who'd been here before me, all of them sleeping forever in whatever space this thing occupied. Before we go any further, if you believe in Jesus, subscribe to my channel because we provide daily Jesus stories that change people's lives. I did the only thing I could think of. I prayed. I hadn't prayed since my mother's funeral, hadn't spoken to God since I'd begged him to save her and he'd let her die anyway. But terror makes believers of us all, and I was more terrified than I'd ever been in my life. I didn't have eloquent words or memorized prayers. I just screamed, "God, help me, please, Jesus, help me." The thing paused. It didn't retreat, but it stopped lowering toward me, hovering there like it was waiting for something. The fluorescent lights flickered, and in that strobing darkness I saw something else in the room. Words scratched into the concrete wall behind the shelving, hidden unless you were pressed into the corner exactly where I was. I had to squint to read them in the flickering light. "It can't touch you if you see it. Stay awake. Stay aware. Watch and pray." Watch and pray. The words hit me like lightning. I'd heard them before in Sunday school a lifetime ago, Jesus telling his disciples to watch and pray so they wouldn't fall into temptation. But here they meant something more literal, more desperate. Keep your eyes open. Stay conscious. Don't let it catch you sleeping. I forced myself to look directly at the thing on the ceiling, even though every instinct screamed to look away, to close my eyes, to escape into unconsciousness. But I looked, really looked, and as I did, I started praying out loud, not begging now, but speaking scripture I didn't even know I remembered. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul." The thing shuddered. The air around it rippled like heat waves, and I saw for just a moment what it really was. Not a monster, but something broken, something that had been human once and had been trapped here so long it forgot what it was. It was a victim that had become a predator, perpetuating the cycle because that was all it knew how to do. "You're not my master," I said, my voice shaking but growing stronger. "You have no authority over me. I belong to God and you can't have me." The fluorescent lights exploded, all of them at once, showering me with glass and plunging the room into complete darkness. But in that darkness I felt a different presence, something warm and solid, like invisible hands steadying my shoulders. A voice spoke, not audibly but directly into my mind, and it said, "Fear not, for I am with you." Light came then, not from the broken fixtures but from somewhere else, everywhere else. A soft glow that had no source but filled the room completely. In that light, the thing on the ceiling was revealed fully, and it was small, pitiful, less terrifying when seen clearly. It retreated from the light, pressing itself into the corner where ceiling met wall, and I understood with sudden clarity that it had only ever had the power I gave it by being afraid, by being asleep, by being unaware. "I see you," I said firmly, "and you have no power here." The door to the storage room slammed open. A figure stood silhouetted in the kitchen light beyond. Marcus, wild-eyed and breathing hard, looking like he'd run a great distance. He stared at me, at the thing shrinking in the corner, at the sourceless light that was already beginning to fade. "You're still alive," he gasped. "How are you still alive?" I stood up on shaking legs, keeping my eyes on the thing in the corner. "Why did you come back?" Marcus slumped against the doorframe. "Guilt," he said simply. "I've been parked down the street every night since you moved in, watching the house, telling myself this time would be different, this time the person would figure it out before it was too late. But they never do, they just disappear into sleep, and I add another death to my conscience." He looked at me with hollow eyes. "I sold you to save myself, but it didn't work. You can't outrun this kind of curse, it follows you." I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, kept seeing their faces. So I came back. "What is it?" I asked, gesturing to the ceiling without looking away from it. "The previous owner's son," Marcus said quietly. "He had some kind of psychotic break, killed himself in this room. But something of him stayed, got twisted into whatever this is. It feeds on sleep, on the vulnerable state between consciousness and unconsciousness. It pulls people in, traps them in dreams until their bodies give out. The room is where it's strongest, but it can reach anywhere in the house once it's marked you." "How do I stop it?" "You can't," Marcus said. "You can only escape it, sell the house to someone else, pass it on. That's what everyone does. That's what I did." I looked at him, this broken man who damned me to save himself, and I felt something unexpected. Not anger, but pity. "No," I said. "That ends tonight." I kept my eyes on the thing in the corner and prayed differently this time, not for protection but for release. I prayed for the soul that had been twisted into this creature, for whatever remained of the boy who died in this room in despair. I prayed for his freedom, for his rest, for God to take back what belonged to him. The temperature in the room shifted, the oppressive cold lifting. The thing in the corner changed. its horrible form softening, becoming more human, and for just a moment I saw him as he'd been. A young man, maybe 20, with terrified eyes and a face tight with anguish. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw recognition there, awareness, the first clear thought he'd probably had in years. "You can go," I told him gently. "You don't have to stay here, let go." The light returned, brighter this time, and it wrapped around the figure like an embrace. He dissolved into it, not violently but like sugar into water, his form becoming part of the brightness. And then both were gone, leaving only the normal darkness of a room with broken lights. The presence, the weight, the watching eyes, all of it evaporated like morning fog. The storage room was just a room again, cold because of poor insulation and nothing more. Marcus was crying in the doorway. "Is it over?" he whispered. "It's over," I said, though I wasn't sure how I knew. I just did. "We burned nothing." Marcus had been dramatic in his guilt, but we did get the room blessed by a priest, and I had it renovated completely, tore out the shelving and repainted the walls a warm cream color, installed new lighting and better insulation. It's my home office now, and I work there in the afternoons. Sunlight coming through the window I had installed, and it's the least haunted room in the house. My life didn't magically improve. I'm still struggling with debt, still working at the warehouse, still driving a car that barely runs. But I sleep now, deep and dreamless, and I wake up in my own bed every morning. The bruises faded, the anger left me, and I found a church, started going to services, relearned how to talk to God in the daylight instead of just in terror. Marcus sold his car and gave me the money, his attempt at restitution. It wasn't enough to undo what he'd done, but it was something, and I accepted it as his first step toward making different choices. Last I heard, he was volunteering at a homeless shelter, trying to tip the scales back toward good. Sometimes, when I'm very tired and the stress builds up, I feel a whisper of that watching sensation, those eyes on me from above. But now I know what to do. I stop, I breathe, I pray. I stay aware. I acknowledge the feeling and refuse to give it power. And it passes every time because fear only rules what we allow it to rule. The clue that saved my life wasn't just scratched into that wall by whoever came before me. It's written throughout Scripture, repeated in different ways across different books. Stay awake, stay alert, watch and pray. It's both practical and spiritual, a reminder that awareness is our defense against whatever prowls in the darkness looking for the unguarded soul. I still live in the house. Property values are up, and I could probably sell it now for what it's actually worth, maybe make a small profit. But I stay because running doesn't solve anything, and this house isn't cursed anymore. It's just a house, ordinary and mundane, filled with my ordinary mundane life. And that's exactly what I fought for. The right to be normal, to sleep in peace, to wake up and face regular problems like bills and work and traffic instead of supernatural terrors. Type Amen if you believe in miracles, if you believe that even in our darkest moments when we're trapped and terrified and completely out of options, God still hears us. He still reaches down. He still saves. If you want to share your own story in the comments, I'll recreate it. Give voice to your experience, because we all have moments when we've touched something beyond the everyday, and those stories matter. They remind us we're not alone, not crazy, and not without hope, even when everything visible says otherwise. MF text, 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 email. Text MF 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 text. I watched my own hand sign away everything I owned, and I felt nothing. Nothing at all. My fingers moved across the paper like they belonged to someone else. My signature looked foreign. My reflection in the window behind the lawyer showed a man I did not recognize. Hollow eyes, sunken cheeks, A puppet whose strings had been pulled so tight they had become invisible. She stood beside me smiling. That smile I once thought was love. That smile I now understand was ownership. And in her pocket, I knew it was there. The toy. That stupid, cheap, plastic thing that somehow contained pieces of my soul I did not remember giving away. You need to hear this story. Not because it is extraordinary, but because it is terrifyingly ordinary. Because right now, somewhere in this world, someone is being handed their own toy. Someone is being told it means protection. Someone is laughing at how silly it seems while something ancient and patient begins its work. I am going to tell you exactly how I lost myself. And more importantly, I am going to tell you exactly how I found my way back from a darkness so complete I forgot what light looked like. My name is Ruiz. I was 32 years old when I met her. A software developer, decent apartment in the city, friends I grabbed drinks with on Fridays, a mother who called too much and a father who called too little. Nothing special about my life, nothing that would make you think I was vulnerable to what happened next. But that is the first lie we tell ourselves, is it not? We think monsters choose damaged people. We think cults recruit the weak. We think abusers target the obviously broken. We are wrong. They target the lonely parts in confident people, the tired parts in successful people, the parts that just want someone to finally understand